And we are live. Hello, everybody. Good evening, and welcome to Forever Rugby on Forever Sports. And it's a Thursday evening, which means that it is the Rugby Fan Forum. And I am joined by, on my screen left, which is, I think, my physical right. It's a bit weird, it's all mirroring. But I'm joined by Dan Skoltz on one end, and I'm joined by Mr. Roots on the other end. Gentlemen, how are we doing?
Fantastic. Freezing in London, but phenomenal now to have a beer in hand and chat a bit of ruggers.
Yeah, man, and just glad the Sharks got a win under their belt, so a little bit easier to breathe.
You're a Sharks fan, Roots?
Not actually. I'm a Bulls fan. It's quite an interesting headline here for the show tonight. So I'm very excited to jump in, but just for the sake of South African supporters,
Yeah.
So much promise and at least delivered something.
That's actually a good point. I don't think I've ever realized who you've actually supported. You're far too just pro South Africa in the group. You're far too the Lions are doing well. It's cool. You know, we need to be more like Chris, where we're just telling him that Stormers are shit. He's telling us the Lions are shit. And
I get it. No, I am a Bull supporter. I think the one guy that obviously pushed me over the edge, and I speak about it a lot, but he was just phenomenal in his time, was Derek Hougaard in 2002 in that Currie Cup final.
Good.
And since then, I haven't looked back.
Yeah, no, what a guy. Jeez, he was a baller.
The headphones are busy bugging out there. So that means that we've got a pretty good representation across the group, because we've got a couple of Sharks fans, a couple of Lions fans. Skolsy, I'm assuming you're a Stormers fan with Chris.
Yes, sir. After the EP Elephants, I'll have you know.
the Bull Cavaliers.
Yes.
So how cool is this, by the way, people? Just on a fun note, I've got a match day program from when I was covering rugby when I was at Rhodes, and I went through to PE to cover Sharks versus Lions back on the Super Rugby, and the warm-up match was Border Bulldogs versus, I think it could have been EP15 or something like that. And guess who was playing on the wing for the Bulldogs?
Makazole,
my pimpy.
That is pretty cool. What
a guy. So, I was actually about to throw this program away, because I was like, all these old programs I got, and I was like, why am I keeping this? And then I was like, well, who played? And I was like, oh, that's wild.
Worth a bit of money.
Yeah. A year later, I was watching him play for the Sharks, where he scored a hat trick when EP, when he played for EP, and they beat Sharks in PE before he then made the move. So yeah, I've been this at the beginning, basically. I discovered him.
Absolutely, I like that, Steve. I love it.
You were there.
I was there when it all started. You know,
the original OG.
Yeah, and they laughed when I told them that he would win the World Cup and score the first try for South African World Cup final.
Sure.
But right, boys, we've got a lot to talk about, because it was actually, bar the Stormers, and then we can go there to Dan. Bar the Stormers, it was a good weekend of South African rugby last weekend. Even the Lions Lions actually scored the most points out of all the SA sides, so that was fun. But 3 out of 4, a decent weekend. Sharks, Springboks were back and made a big difference, it must be said. I think for me, it's a bit worrying how big of a difference it made, I think, to a certain degree, because I think that's such a stacked squad before the Springboks that I think they should have been getting results before they even came back. But yes, so let's start at the very beginning, because it's a very good place to start. A last-minute loss against Cardiff? I'm going blank now.
Yeah, Cardiff.
Yeah, Cardiff.
Yeah,
Dan, what's going on with your boys?
Oh, man, painful. I think I've eradicated a lot of that game out of my memory just out of frustration. I think we went 2 scores up with 20 to play. I was like, okay, well, now we're breaking away a little bit. And I think it was from that kickoff we concede again. And then just cannot put the game to bed. It's just so frustrating. Trying same old, trying too much, just not enough composure out of the people. I think there's definitely a bit of a lack of experience in that side. It's so telling, and I mean, it's kind of showed in Australia at the World Cup when people don't know who to look to. And I think that's kind of what the Stormers is at the moment. They just, without their senior players back, just don't really know who to look to make those big decisions. Those who have worn like a Bok jersey and been under this type of pressure, because it's not like we actually, I mean, our points difference on this away tour is probably not more than -20, but we've lost every single one. So they're close games. Each of them kind of within 5. You know, these are touching distance games. And all of which, or at least I think 2, if not 3 of them, we've led in. So it's not like
you got a positive points difference of 19 despite losing 4 out of 6 matches.
Yeah, well, there you go. I mean, there was from our one blot one, I think it was versus the Dragons. We only narrowly kind of edged the Lions, but essentially it's a matter of getting to like the 65th minute and being able to know how to close out a game, and we haven't been able to do that, and it shows, and we're paying for it on the leaderboard down there in the bottom half.
Yeah, well, the good news is that Damien Villains posted on Instagram, good to be back, was in the Stormers colours this week. I also saw a photo of Hachiva Daimani training as well. I think he's going to be a nice boost. I think Mani Liebach is probably, for me, the biggest. I think Damien Villains is what the Stormers have really missed at inside centre. Dan du Plessis, I think, as well has been missed. But what I think Sasha Femi-Gomez is a tremendous player. But I think we've all been agreeing he's not that player to get you over the ball that gain line. He just can't, make those couple of yards sort of set up. But Roots, maybe a bit about the Stormers, maybe in general as well. Struggling with the travels. Overseas teams obviously struggle when they come here as well. Which, look, I mean, when you're a Zebra and a Dragons and a Connacht, and you've been playing in Europe now, and you come down to Gauteng, which I can verify last weekend was horrendously hot, and you're playing in 35, 36 degrees. It's no wonder they struggle. But why do you think the South African team's 3rd season into Europe now, we're not new to this, really. We've been over there. We kind of know what to expect, but yet we're still struggling. What do you think the reason is for that?
For me, just observing as a South African rugby supporter, I think the interesting part is when we go over there, we end up doing badly in terms of not getting the victories under the belt. But it's always close games. We don't seem to have that sort of mental edge. Yet when they come over here, then we sort of trounce them, and it's like 6 tries to 1 or something like that. So the interesting part is, I don't know if it's the trick in the timing of the year. I think South Africans, perhaps it's a case of we also have a tendency to not necessarily enjoy playing rugby over December, I suppose. And then
it's December, the boys supposed to be drinking.
For sure. Also the fact of the season there being the conditions. I mean, you go to a place like Connacht and it's like 65 knot winds, 6 degrees Celsius. I don't think the players, South African players, we are as adapted to those conditions. It's almost like in terms of the cricket, us going over to the subcontinent and playing in those conditions, we're not doing it enough. So when we get there, we sort of struggle tremendously. We also have the issue of the artificial pitches, which is not something that's really, and I don't want to make excuses, but I think it's going to take a little bit.
So it's a combination of things, really.
Yes, a lot of variables.
Do you think the artificial pitches really have an issue, like have an impact on like the capability of like being able to win the game? Like how much does that really change? Like I can understand. I can imagine both teams don't really want to play on those types of pitches. They would way rather play on a nice, a lawn. But
I'm with
do
you,
you
Dan.
think that favors?
I just think from my point of view, it's also, I guess, maybe small margins, but those artificial pitches tend to be a little bit faster, and South Africans like to perhaps slow the game down a little bit more. And then, of course, like we said, the timing in the year is just not ideal for us to be traveling. We almost have a mindset of we want to be home, we want to be around our mates, our family, and we want to enjoy our ruggers at Ellis Park or Pretoria. So you saw the flip when the Bulls played and the Sharks played at home. It was massive, and the Lions, of course, massive scores. But take next week, we go there, and it could be a very close game. So it is rather disconcerting, but I think all is not lost. The other teams have obviously still got to come here, and we're just going to rack up a massive points margin when they do.
Well, rack up points margins, and it is exactly what happened, to be fair. 3 teams going over 50 points. Let's talk a little bit about that Saturday games. The Lions hammering Zebra, which a year ago you would say it was expected, but this is a Zebra side that did draw a game a couple of weeks ago. Did beat the Sharks, yes, at home, but the Lions absolutely annihilated them. We then saw the Bulls hammer Connacht, a Connacht side would have just beaten the Sharks at the Shark Tank. And then the Sharks pitching up. And yeah, the Springboks were there. Maybe I mean, Eben Etzebeth scored a phenomenal try. It looked like he hadn't, you know, didn't miss a beat. Mapimpi looked pretty solid.
Some gas. It's got some gas.
Yeah, I'll tell you, those long legs. I was just watching him, and I was just thinking, you could not pay me enough money to stand in front of that guy.
Yeah,
when he was running like that particular run with the knees up high. I was like, how would you even begin to try and bring this guy down?
Knees and elbows.
True story.
Yeah,
true story.
And if you do, he'll take it personally, and he'll just F you up for like the sake of it, just for like, excuse me. He's like, no. But Roots back at home, and these sort of score lines. How much can we read into these score lines? You know, are they reflective of the quality of our teams? You know, is it reflective of the conditions and how we know how well we play at home? I mean, for example, as a Lions fan, how excited can I get watching that performance? As a Sharks fan, do you dare to get excited about the fact that maybe this is the turnaround? Or is this just a case, a bit like when we go over, that these teams just really struggled down here?
I think for me, I was listening to Jake White in the week, and he was speaking about the challenge. I think now is for the South African sides is going to be when the actual Champions Cup and the Challenge Cup comes in, how the South African teams are able to then divide up their squads in terms of which one they're really going to go hell for leather for and try and push for, because I don't think both competitions, the URC and the Champions Cup or Challenge Cup respectively, I don't think any team is going to be able to hit both quite successfully. What does help the teams like the Sharks and the Bulls, for example, and of course the Stormers, would be the addition of the Springboks with experience, with their playing abilities. With the Lions, it's exciting to see them. We look back at the Lions of a couple of years ago when they were in the Rugby Super Rugby final, and that Lions team were carefree, but they had this belief in every single player. The playing style was pure, and they just seemed to have put something together where I think now they're perhaps struggling a little bit to hold on to a lot of players, but of course they have managed to churn out guys like Sanela Nohamba, the scrum off, fly off. So quality players. I just don't know then, like I mentioned, in terms of the competition coming up for them, it's going to be the Challenge Cup.
Yeah.
How they then navigate where they're going to put their emphasis on.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. And I don't know how the coach necessarily get it right, because a certain part of me says that maybe for the Lions, it might be easier to flick your way to a Challenge Cup semi-final, final, then win the URC. Alternatively, you're sitting there thinking, well, we're not going to try win the URC, but get to top 8 and we get Champions Cup qualification, which I think there will be eventually quite a lot of financial significance getting into the Champions Cup, for example. So it's interesting to see the different goals. You know, I think that I think it's going to be a while before we start to see a South African side contend for the Champions Cup. I just think it, until we get those playing squads up, I think I just don't see how we legitimately challenge, because the travel is a lot. Yes, it's not time difference, but a year ago, and Double was asking a very good question where it says, do teams still fly via Doha, for example, where they were going via doing sort of 2-3 day long haul flights and stuff like that, which you can't be doing now. Obviously, that kind of starts changing as the finance start changing, and you're suddenly going from like doing economy, doing a 30-hour trip, to doing a 12-hour straight trip to France in business class overnight type thing, where you get a decent night's sleep in and you're basically ready to go the next day. Dan, how do we get that balance right? And And where do you think the team should be focusing? Should we be focusing at just qualifying for these sort of competitions? As a Sharks, not qualifying for the Champions Cup for me last year, it was shocking, absolutely shocking with the resources they had. So how much do you think should go into trying to compete for these competitions versus almost kind of, not want to say binning them, because you don't want to seem that you're not taking them seriously, but being willing to go out and give you emphasis on the URC?
Yeah, I think regarding really competing in semi-finals and upwards of like the Champions Cup is going to be incredibly difficult. Like, if this was 10, 15 years ago where only Springboks with 30 plus caps could leave, and you had like a really strong Bok kind of centered club level in South Africa still, perhaps. But I mean, you're really looking at only, I don't know, 50% of Springboks playing in South Africa still, and that's spread, over 4 or 5 different clubs. So I think to have a team that then competes with the likes of, the La Rochelles of this world, Toulouse, Toulon, I mean, just the French clubs, and then even like Saracens, just the money that they have. I mean, Saracens are going through their own problems, and it looks like Mario Toje might leave there. But just the finances at play do make it difficult to go for both, essentially, because you need to be able to have that depth. I don't think it's like an absolute failure if South African teams aren't always competing, because it just means that I feel like we're always just breeding our next generation of players, because the other ones are playing elsewhere. So our lesser players are actually gaining more experience. And maybe that's kind of going back to what Ruud was saying. I think as South African teams still kind of want all the South African teams to be competitive, because it's like for the goal, for like, even if it's a Lions player that makes the Springboks, I'm happy, because then he's a Springbok, and because I want the Springboks to win. I think there's a much more of like a country orientation than a club orientation, let's say. So, like, yeah, I think it's difficult. We saw, I mean, South African teams haven't really done well. Obviously, the Storms have done very well in the URC, and as well as the Bulls in the last 2 seasons, and that's a long season with a lot more beatable teams, and then a couple crunch matches that you need to get through. Whereas the Champions Cup, it's a lot. It's all of those high quality games, home and away, which are always a bit more difficult. So yeah, I think I guess you're going to have to pick your battles, and as you say, where the finances are is going to be essentially where people start prioritizing, and also what position they're in. Come URC, you'll see Stormers now. They lost 4 from 4 in the last 4, so they're going to have to prioritize URC. They can't just bin it. This is like their competition that they've been doing well in for the last 2 seasons. So I think there's more pride always in the round robin one, because that's more of a reflection of your whole season. But the glitz and the glamour of like a Champions Cup still kind of can look nicer. So yeah, it's the kind of weights and biases.
Yeah, I suppose you can almost sort of adopt a bit of a French approach, where they often send weakened sides to the away games, and they say, we know if we win our home games, we can probably sneak through into the next round. And then after that, you then go, cool. It also doesn't help that previously, for example, we've always had to play, if we were to get a semi-final, for example, we're playing that overseas and stuff like that. And hopefully that'll begin to change when we become full members of the EPCR, which I think is in 2 years' time, if I'm not mistaken. But I suppose it's an interesting sort of thing, and we're a very proud nation, so to sit there and have to admit that we just can't compete is we don't take that very well, but it is the reality that we're in at the moment, and the whole goal for going to Europe was to start building these cash reserves, to start building this financial strength, so that we can keep players, and we can then in 3-4 years time sit there and say, well, Damien, you don't need to go overseas, you can play your entire career here. And the next generation aren't going overseas, and build that player base, salary caps are increasing and stuff like that. But I want to talk about a bit about the title of the show, because now we're talking about players who are going overseas, players who are moving, for example. We all want players to be box, I think is what Dan was saying. And it's an interesting story, which is the reason the title of the show. Because somebody actually commented on. I did a video yesterday on the Similani story. Now, if you haven't been following the situation, Similani has played 6 minutes for the Bulls so far this season. We're talking about a player who played and started, I think, if I remember correctly, in that Springbok Gold versus Springbok Green post-COVID game. He had a couple of games, I think 2 or 3 games he played against Lekanya when he's playing for Lions, where he actually outplayed him. And he was the heir apparent, to Lekanya. And he left Lions as their best player by a country mile. He went to the Bulls, and it just hasn't happened. As I said, 6 minutes this season, and apparently now down in Durban trying to get a loan deal. Somebody also referenced Spur and Corsi, the Spur and Corsi situation. World Cup winner, moves from Sharks to the Bulls. Now, yes, it's a bit of a different situation because he had all the, the mental health issues, but a lot of people have been saying that the feeling is that the Bulls didn't deal with it particularly well, and that it was an environment which wasn't conducive to him being able to have these issues and be able to work through it. I look back at somebody like a Burger Undal, who was captain of the Bulls and then got sold when he wanted to stay, and they said, no, we don't need you, off you go. Went to the Lions and had a stormy season, got picked up in Europe and stuff like that. So what I want to talk about is the Bulls environment, because whilst I think certain players have gone there and it just hasn't worked out, a Similani, for example, a Spur and Corsi, we've also seen the rise of Kane and Moody. We've seen the rise of Kurt Liorense, Ruan Nokia. So there's certainly players who have come through. But Ruud, let's maybe chat a little bit about why do you think some players have just not been able to adapt and some players have? Because from a talent perspective, 2 years ago, we didn't know who Kane and Moody. Well, a lot of people didn't know who Kane and Moody was, and wanted to see that Similani was like truly going to the World Cup. Now Kane and Moody is a World Cup winner, and Similani can't get a look in, for example.
Yeah, Steve, it's a tough one, really. I think for the most part, in my opinion, it's like the great that separates the spectacular from the great is that willingness to never take your foot off the pedal. And I think sometimes, whether it's social media or whatever for that matter, we put a lot of emphasis on, let's say, for example, we see a player in training and he's doing all sorts of fancy things. And the players pick up on that, I guess, and this is just my opinion. But then you start to believe that you're getting there, but then you don't actually put in the one foot in front of the other foot and actually do the legwork. So just because he got to the Bulls doesn't mean now that he's set up to become a Springbok. And it's no disrespect to Wandisile Similani. I think he's a great player, but just that edge that separates the great from the spectacular is that willingness to keep on keeping on. And that's where some players are shown up a little bit. Obviously, with Spoo, it's slightly different. There's a lot of personal things that I guess went on that we don't know the full scope of. But when you're looking at a team like the Bulls and Jake White being quite a strict coach, I don't think there's a lot of time for niceties in sort of wondering and just riding the crest of the wave. You've got to keep putting in that hard work. And we see a guy like Stedman Gans, for example, coming through, and all of a sudden there's talk of him perhaps being the next Springbok as well. But I think for him, for just as an example, for him, what would be important to put that sort of ideas aside and just keep doing what he's doing, and I think the rest will sort itself out.
Yeah, I think the thing you made a point I think that was very important there was that Jake White environment, which is very much it is a strict environment. It is, I think he is quite a you shape up or ship off type person. He's very no nonsense, and it's always difficult to say which approach works because some coaches are fairly authoritarian and they've had tremendous success. He's a World Cup winning coach. You can't question the credentials. Some coaches, and I think this is the next generation of coaches, are far less sort of rigid and stuff like that. And I think there's a lot of rhetoric and a lot of proof in the pudding, I think, in people coaches investing in the people, and the player will come out type thing. You invest in the person.
Much more of a
player will come out. Dobbo, I'm thinking even Rassie Rasmus and Jacques Naba, when they spoke about we've got the right 33 players here, he said very specifically, might not be the best 33 players. It's the best 33 players for us. You know, it's the best players in terms of the system, the types of people and stuff like that. And I think Dobbo is the best example. And I think that I think if you go back a few years ago, I think Jan Ackerman was a bit like that, in that he took a group of players that nobody believed in and said, I will back you guys. I will 100% back you guys. I believe you guys can go all the way. There was that trust, that sort of relationship and stuff like that, that man, and that can get players to play above their ability. Martin Liebach was binned by the Bulls. He was binned by the Sharks. He goes to Stormers 2 years later. He's World Cup winner. Coaches or some players also respond to those different things, because again, you know, somebody like a Caden Moody has obviously, I mean, he's flown through the ranks of Bulls, and obviously whatever the environment is, there is an environment that suits him. So Dan, you know, I mean, I suppose there's no real right or wrong answer, but you know, how much do you think that maybe needs to come into when players look at moves and stuff like that, for players to even start understanding the type of, maybe the coach or type of environment they need to be in to be successful, and not just go and say, I'm a great player, that's a great team, it's a good mix. The Sharks, for example, I think there are a lot of players that moved to the Sharks that were still not quite seeing what they've done at other unions.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. I think that's definitely a consideration. Anyone who's played, you know, sport at a semi-competitive level knows different types of coaching styles, and ones that gets the best out of them, and ones that maybe can put you into your shell. And that's on a person-to-person basis. And as you said, neither can be kind of, you know, pushed aside and said X is better than Y. What I will say is, I think in the world of sport, there's a much bigger trajectory to being the arm around, to be the people manager more than the authoritarian, and to be essentially, you need to have the confidence of the dressing room. You know, you need to have the locker room behind you as much as you are behind them, because I do think this authoritarian style, but Eddie Jones as well, that comes to mind. These athletes are they previously maybe didn't have a lot of a voice, right? The only ever person that spoke on the entire squad's behalf was perhaps the coach, maybe the captain. So you're speaking about a very small point of contact, where in the world where now everyone knows everyone, and everyone knows a piece of everyone's personality through social media, there is an understanding of relations and types of people that might match or not match with others. I think because of that, it's had to become a point, not had to become, but and maybe perhaps better off. I mean, as you said, the Springboks and Jacques Niebaba and Rassie are good examples of it, as picking the people that suit them, and showing full belief, and kind of dying by, and like, you know, putting themselves in the crossfire of any of their players. I think players are responding much more to that than the, you know, army type of authoritarian figure that once was. So I think it's a general shift in all sports, not just rugby. And as you say, it's not that to say that Jake White is completely that, but perhaps he, as you said, he doesn't bring out the best in Wandile Simelane that he might have got in another space that he was the star. I mean, you also see that type of thing. You know, he's come to the Bulls, you know, objectively a team that's performed better in the last couple of seasons, maybe not given as much freedom and playing a bit more to a system doesn't suit him as much as well. I mean, there are a variety of reasons, and you wouldn't be able to just put it down to the Wandile Simelane case. But if you just look at what Dobbo's done at the Stormers, it kind of has embodied exactly what you want to see out of a team, and in terms of a belief system from someone like Manie Liebach, who went from, you know, he's got to be a pretty low on confidence player arriving at the Stormers, as someone who's done a bit of a full circle back to Western Province, not really done a bunch within the South African circuit, and then a bit of belief, and now he's performing with that same confidence in a Springboks jersey, you know?
Steve, sorry, just to jump in the you speak about, and I agree with it, the environment that suits the player at a specific union might not suit him at another union. But just a special mention to a player like Sergio Peterson, to me, is timeless, because coming from from the EP Kings, going to the Stormers, and now at the Bulls. And I mean, he's quite well seasoned in age, still relatively young, but so much experience, and yet he's still putting in the hard work. And Jake White has rewarded him for that.
Yeah, even looking at yeah, no, and the ultimate professional, really. No, I'm a big Sergio Peterson fan. I think that I think it's very cool to see him doing so well, especially when you think, I mean, he's been around the block for a long time, and as you mentioned, he's still quite young. He's not even sure he's 30. And I think that's also for me what's become quite interesting.
Sorry, Steve. No, carry on.
As I say, I think what's quite interesting is when you can identify those certain players as well. I think that comes with a lot of recruitment, and I think that's where the Sharks initially, I think, got their recruitment incredibly wrong, where they went and said, right, you know, we go and buy all the big name stars and stuff like that. We throw them in a team; it'll all be fine, and here we go. Whereas I think, you know, you've got to be. I think recruitment is far more than just the player from a playing personnel point of view. You know, so I think Bulls have obviously looked at a Sergio Peterson and said, right, that's someone that can thrive in this system, and he has. There's a couple of it's interesting to see how there's been a couple of signings over the years where, you know, players who are struggling or players who've been around but not really sort of settled in have just gone to one union, and it just works for them. Molly Liebach is one of the best examples of that. And it's always sort of vice versa. I said there's some players who are phenomenal, and then just it all kind of falls apart for them. So yeah, I think that whole sort of coach psyche thing, I think it's such an interesting discussion. I think it'd be really cool to start maybe get a couple of coaches on here and sort of understand what from a coaching education point of view, you know, I wonder, it'd be interesting to know what, you know, when you do your coaching qualification stuff like that within a South African perspective, what the kind of rhetoric is regarding sort of players and stuff, because it is a very different generation. And I think that's the biggest thing. I think to be a successful coach, you have to be adaptable. You know, you have to realize that you can't have Camp Strolder and all that from 20, 30 years ago and with the current bunch of players and expect that kind of thing to work. And I think that's why certain coaches are getting things right. As I said, for as much as I think a lot of people don't rate Ivan van Ooyen, I'm still very impressed with what he and his coaches are doing with a Lions side, which on paper have got nothing really. And they've got no superstars. I mean, the only internationals they've got are well past their prime, for example, and yet they're putting together a reasonable side. So, yeah, Lions with resource would be fun.
Steve, sorry, just on a lighter note, I think a player, we mentioned him earlier, Eben Etzebeth, could pretty much play for any team and be excellent. We're just struggling, or I'm struggling to see him in a Sharks jersey. It just doesn't seem to fit so lekker, just the look. What do you guys think there?
Well, I think they're about to make him the face of the Sharks. So I think get ready. Although I do enjoy the banter he's got with Sia Khaleesi. I think he's a bit miffed. I think Sia phoned him and said, Evan, come to the Sharks. Come, we're gonna be boys, we could be neighbors, we're gonna have a great time. And Evan was like, all right, cool, let me relocate down there. It's just like, hey, sweet, cheers, dude, I'm out of here. I'm off.
And he jetted off. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I brought him in and then said, all right, cool, cheers. No, I do agree. There's certain players that, you know, you just shouldn't be playing for other unions. That it always looks weird.
I think also, sorry, another player worth mentioning at the Bulls with Jake White now recruiting is Willie Leroux. I think back a couple of seasons back, I think Jake did sign him up at Toyota Verblitz when they were over in Japan. But then I think when Willie came to Toyota, then Jake White was leaving. So there was sort of an unfinished business. But I think Jake always knew that this is the sort of player, if he becomes available, we'd be desperate to get. And in his first game, I think Jake White made it pretty clear that people should shut up and really just enjoy Willie for being such an awesome talent that he is.
I mean, I think going to run circles around the URC. He's gonna have
Currie on the one wing, Sturgeon on the other wing. Trevino Yakov is gonna come back. He's gonna have Kanan Moody as options. No, he's gonna have a good time.
And to be honest, I don't know if even that's when Willie plays his best rugby. Come to think of it, when he has too much space and time, and you know he needs sometimes his creativity to be bottled a little bit just for spurts of it. Otherwise,
he needs a defense that's like unreal.
Just like everything the whole time what I want. It's like sometimes there's also just a gap in front of you that you can run through, you know.
Yeah, I think that signing for me is such an intelligent sign because they're signing a coach as well. You know, if you've ever watched him live, the amount he talks on the field and moves and dictates and communicates. I think that he's going to be a brilliant coach one day. I think he just reads a game like a book, and I think that that's going to be invaluable. I mean, if you're sitting there with the next generation of players, I mean, as a Currie Aronson, who's not even that young, but a Kane Moody, who's so young, and you've got a Willie Leroux, for example. You've got even a Johan Goosen now. You've got a Jacob van der Walt who's been around the block. Also, can we talk about how good of a signing that could potentially be? I think the Bulls recruitment has actually been phenomenal this particular window. I think they've brought in the right players in the right positions and the right type of players. I mean, Volker Lowe as well. He's been like
solid. But that bloody pass of Willie Leroux, I mean, he just reminded me of how good he is at passing a rugby ball.
Yeah. No, that lofted overseas. Oh no, he's just poetry in motion, and it makes me sad that the Bulls are just bringing so many cool players back, and the Lions brought. I don't think we brought anybody back really. But anyway, let's move on to the betting segment because Chris is hiding because the Stormers are doing so bad at the moment, and he is hanging his head in shame at the fact that if we look at a URC table right now, he would see that the Lions are above them as things. So normality has resumed, and the Sharks sitting at 14th. But he has provided us with a bit of a betting slip, and in many ways, I'm quite surprised he didn't grace his presence because we're back to winning, boys. We are back to winning. We had a bit of a blip, but things are back and trending in the right direction. And as soon as I can add this, there it is.
Take my money. Take my money.
Yeah, just go and there's the one. Right, so that is the betting segment or the betting tips for this weekend. Courtesy of Boyle Sports. Obviously, these are all the marks and stuff I get from Boyle, where Chris cooks us up these bets. And as you can see, a return on investment of 49%, a return of 29.35 units. That means whatever your unit is, if it's 10 Rand, whatever, times by 29.35, and that's how much we have made so far. So it's been looking good. So last week he predicted a Bulls win, a Leinster win, an Ospreys win, and they all did hit. And this week he has decided to bring the handicaps back, which is a strength. He's a very good handicap better. So he's reckoning 3 units. So if you look at the confidence levels there, 3 units is when you're at a medium. So if it's a low confident bet, you're betting 1 to 2 units. High, 4 to 5 units. If you're in the middle, there's 3 units. Again, if you guys don't know what a unit is, it's basically you decide how much you are willing to bet. So if you put in 100 Rand, for example, and you decide your unit is 10 Rand, you've got 10 units to play with. So if you're then putting 3 units on, you're putting in 30 Rand if you are new to that. On that note, we've got a very exciting announcement to make. If you are new to betting, or even if you are just trying to broaden your horizon, we will be introducing a betting masterclass, which will be launching next week, brought to you by our betting partners over at Boyle Sports. So they'll be doing Chris is going to be doing a whole series on how betting works, how to sign up and stuff like that, and where to get involved. So this weekend, he's saying Sharks on the handicap plus 11.5 against the Bulls. And he's going with a Leinster win. That comes out at 2. So 3 units on that. Double your money, basically, is how that will pan out. So hopefully we can get that return on investment above 50%, and we can add an extra 3 units to that season record. So as always, shout out to Boyle Sports for bringing us such good markets. And shout out to the Crow Tips, who's not here. But the good news is that if you're in South Africa, you might see him around, because I believe he is traveling tomorrow back to the land of the south and sun and heat. And so the numbers in London dwindle, Dan, unfortunately. But I believe he will be coming back eventually, so you don't need to worry.
Yeah, I'll be back.
Yeah, so that's there for Chris. If you'd like to see some more tips over the weekend, although as I said, he is on a plane, so I'm not quite sure how active he'll be, but you can go follow him on X, formerly Twitter, at The Crow Tips. So big shout out to Chris there. Right, gentlemen, let's have a look at this coming weekend, because we've got a local derby. And I think my gut feeling is I think people are starting to get over the World Cup hangover. You know, there were 2 or 3 weeks where people could just not be asked about rugby. after the World Cup final, everyone's like, no, we need a break. I'm feeling that we're kind of getting back into things now. Like, it's December, people are clocking off work. It's time to start having a good time. Rudes, Bulls versus Sharks, home game for your side. A Sharks side, which is, who knows what the Sharks side can do really, because they lost to Zebra and they've annihilated Dragons at home. So how are you feeling as a Bulls fan?
I'm pretty confident, just based on having obviously someone like Willie Leroux there, your Kanan Moody's, but then your old dogs, your Nizam Cars are also coming through. Jake White, listening to him again earlier in the week, was talking about a guy like Ruan Nokia, who's basically 2 players in one. So the Bulls can have 16 players on the field because his work rate, his passing in the line-out, his
Franco
defensive
Moster Jr.
capabilities. Yeah, something like that. The understudy to Franco Mostert. For the Sharks, obviously they're going to have your Ibn Etzebeth, your Oxen Chairs off the bench. So scrum-wise, I think it's going to be an interesting battle for Wilco Low up against Oxen Chair, should they meet up. Obviously, the engine room is where it all starts. But I think for the Bulls, just looking at them at the moment, sitting third on the table, I think the confidence is definitely there in the entirety of the squad, where the Sharks are just sort of they just got themselves over that little blip, and did get a win, and I'm not sure how much confidence they'll be able to take to Loftus against the Bulls. So I'm pretty confident. It's a tough one for the Bulls as well, or should I say for all South African sides, because just looking at the Bulls fixtures for the next couple of weeks in terms of the URC, I think it's the Stormers they're playing as well, and then they're playing the Lions 2 games in a row. So it's going to be heartbreak on the one end, but definitely some joy for one of the teams. I think they have introduced obviously the South African Shield, so I think there is some sort of emphasis to make these games a priority as well. But I just think for Jake White, World Cup winning coach, seems to be stitching it nicely together. He has the wider squad, and they've all bought into the Jake White idea. I think he mentioned as well, though, last season, I think they pushed maybe a lot of players for too long, too frequently, and they just suffered a little bit of burnout. I don't sense that at the moment. But on paper, the Sharks are extraordinary. So I don't want to throw them out completely. I just think the Bulls for the win there.
Dan, agree?
Yeah, I think the Bulls will win. It would be good to see a close game. I think I'd love to see a competitive Sharks. I mean, there was a comment earlier about Masuku getting a start for the Sharks, and kind of I just keep on looking at Currie and Bosch starting for them, and it feels like we go through the same pattern every season.
Were you here last week when Chris had his Currie and Bosch? Did you watch Chris's Currie and Bosch meltdown?
No, but I can imagine what Chris is.
Absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, I can't imagine Chris being a massive Currie and Bosch fan somehow.
No.
But it's, I mean, you bring in this guy from the Cheetahs, won the Currie Cup with them, like, real promise, really exciting, and they had a lot of problems, and I don't know if Buddha Chamberlain is there.
He's been around there. Yeah, it is
weird. They both had their time, so it'll be interesting to see how they use him. So I really like to see him play there. In a backline that's actually really exciting. When you look at it on paper, it's like there's the people. I kind of looked at the team sheet, and was like, geez, everyone there, and then you kind of look at. I feel like Currie and Bosch is a bit of a step below. So, trying out, I think Masuku could be very interesting. But I just think the Bulls at Loftus, they seem to be hitting their stride. They're getting the job done. Somehow, maybe this is the Stormers part of me speaking, but the Bulls don't necessarily get as many blowout wins, but they get just as many wins. They'll continue to tick over and get it done, and I completely agree with Roots. It's like Jake White's got something going there. It seems like this season as well as we've spoken about, great recruitment. Those forwards kind of really all know each other, and it's bolstered in the right types of places. Very recently in Volcolo, but also a little bit back in Zamkar. But then Ulrich Lohr, Ruan Nokia, Marcel Cassia, they've been there at the helm. These are guys who are now you associate with the Bulls colors, right? They're carrying the badge. I think we spoke a couple of weeks ago. We don't really know who that person is for the Sharks. Like, who's the Sharks captain, right? We can't think of like that Sharks player and the person that embodies that. Whereas the Bulls, I feel like, have that identity. I think they'll take it over the line by, I think my SUPERBRU, I've said 10.
10. Okay. Yeah, I think I'm also going with the Bulls win. Yeah, I just think that the Bulls are settled at the moment. I still think it could be a high-scoring game because I think the Bulls' defense still doesn't inspire me with a lot of confidence. I think they are still conceding far too many soft tries and too many points, but that attack looks very potent at the moment. Yeah, I think what we saw last weekend was maybe a bit of a snippet of what Plumtree wants to do at the Sharks. I mean, there were some beautiful tries being scored, but it's always difficult to look at it against Dragons, who are one of the weaker sides. So I'm very keen to see what the plan is for this weekend and how they sort of execute it. The big news for the Stormers is that they are back at home and absolutely desperate for a win. Dan, it's got to be. It's almost the case of a win's not good enough. It's been such a bad tour. You're playing against Zebra. This needs to be a statement win. Which means plenty of tries, lots of good rugby. This has to be a case of them getting back into the groove, isn't it?
Yeah, on my SUPERBRU, I think I've said 44-point win, and I'm going big summer blowout. December. Stormers at home. They might actually are they playing at the Donny Craven?
Yeah.
I think they are because I think it's because it's being kept for Sevens next week.
Of course, yeah. So not home, but yeah, I feel like it's gonna run away. As I said, they haven't been losing badly. I feel like a lot of it has been a bit of a mentality and being away from home. I just seeing South African teams with wearing their seconds, with when 50% of them are wearing their skins, it's just that there's trouble. Yeah. It's not going to work. It's just a South African team doesn't do well when that's happening. But yeah, I think the Stormers are going to absolutely clap Zebra. I hope, because they need to get those confidence levels right back up there for what's going to be a busy kind of stretch of home games with some a lot more competitive opposition. So setting the tone with Zebra should be the start of that all.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I'm hoping we will see a similar thing with the Lions as well against the Dragons. It's going to be cooking this weekend. Probably won't be as hot as last weekend, but it's still cooking. And I think that Lions side is starting to, and they've named identical 23, so starting to find a bit of form, which is good to see. Asnat and Klabakanya is ready to take over from France Moherbe. Kid is proper. But a couple of other games is the likes of Munster versus Glasgow Warriors, which I think is probably my game of the weekend. We're talking about the current. Well, to be fair, Munster haven't had the best start of the season. Glasgow Warriors have looked unbelievable so far. Cardiff versus Scarlets, Ulster versus Edinburgh, Connacht versus Leinster, a little Interpro there. And Benton versus Ospreys, which is the final clash, which is on Saturday at 9:30. Gentlemen, the last thing I'd like to talk about, I think a couple of nice games there. The last thing I'd like to talk about is a little bit away from URC. Owen Farrell has taken a break from international rugby due to the abuse he received from this panel. Not quite, but he has decided to take a bit of a break from international rugby due to he wants to prioritize the mental health of him and his family, which I think is a great decision from him. And I think we need to see this. I don't want to say you want to encourage it because you want all these players leaving, but you need to encourage the players that they've got this option if they want to take it. But I think it's an important move. We saw Michael Hooper doing a similar thing a year ago. He's just saying that he's not in the right headspace. He's taking a bit of space back, coming back, which I think is very healthy. But yeah, Ruud, what's your thoughts? First of all, in terms of players being brave enough to take the step, and also how much of this is a reminder that criticism is one thing, abuse is another, and we've got to try and find that sort of line which we can't cross, so that we aren't driving our players into early retirement and into taking all these breaks and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think the saying goes, men live a life of quiet desperation. So I think sometimes they do take a lot of flack from social media, from us pundits, but I think they also balance it out to filter through a lot of that. But then sometimes it does get personal, and to keep in mind, they're also building a life as young men, with life beyond rugby, and rugby, your career is only so long, and you want to build something sustainable beyond rugby, and you'll have your family safe and protected. And I think for him, that's just the time now to step away. I obviously don't have any idea what the permutations are, but it's irrespective. I just think the fact that he's put his hand up and said, listen, guys, I need some time away from rugby, and I need to focus on my own well-being in my mind, because they do a lot of training for the body, obviously, in terms of weightlifting and all that sort of thing. But I think just pulling yourself away, being brave enough, I think we don't commend that often enough as men. So shout out and respect to Owen Farrell for that, no doubt. And I think we hope and wish that he comes back as good or a better player. We don't necessarily like the way he plays, but I think he's a professional, and this is his thing. He's found his why, and let's just give him the opportunity to recharge. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's been summed up very well. Thanks, Ruse. But Dan, maybe you're expanding more on the cause of this. We've seen this now, referees as well, coming out talking about their threats to family and stuff like that. I suppose it's long past time, isn't it, that measures need to be stepped up and it's not just the online abuse, to be fair. People are sitting there saying, you can watch videos of Owen Farrell going across to his family after a game, and people are booing him and hurling abuse at him. And probably been really difficult for him is the last year has been his own fans, and players getting booed when you're playing for your country by your home fans. So, it's, do you think how do you even begin to address this? How do we start shifting fan culture and online culture so that we don't have these issues?
Jeez, yeah, weighted question. But yeah, I think just to echo what Rid said, like, fair play to him to having the guts to come out, because I'm sure they're like anticipated a lot of flack from it. He's one of kind of rugby's hard men, and like I'm fully on the kind of in the belief that whatever country he plays for, that country, if you're South African, would love him.
Yeah,
but because he's
not,
not,
100% agree.
He's the villain, and he is a villain. That's the way he plays. He antagonizes people. He knows
he's the pantomime villain.
It's the reason that England got so close to beating South Africa, and he's such a big character on the field, and because of that, he's becomes on the receiving end of a lot of abuse, and it got to a stage. Interesting to see. I mean, we've seen Willie Leroux take how much flack from the Springbok fan base as well, right? To the extent where he, voluntarily in 2019 World Cup goes up to the coaches and say, you can drop me if you want to, pretty much purely based off like internet talk, and criticism against him. And I guess there is a line that's in jest and what we do here, and we speak about it, and we'll be frustrated when Owen Farrell high tackles someone, and we'll get angry because it's something that we're here to speak about. But I think there's a line that can be crossed that I guess to remember that there's a person at the receiving end of it, and as Ruud said, there's a life past rugby for him, and being able to understand that is massive, and no one's looking at Owen Farrell as some person that can't take on a challenge, right? Mm-hmm. He is not someone to be the person to give up on the first attempt. It's clearly a very thought out. and I was somehow a bit surprised, not less because the announcement came now, because I think he's made a very good start to his season with Saracens, and they've done really well, and apparently he's been quite like reinvigorated. Whereas right after that World Cup, I get maybe it's just taking a bit of time to digest. But I mean, jeepers, the Owen Farrell talk, especially, you know, George Ford coming back into the mix, and, you know, the speak of the kind of what was that, the fight with him and
Henry Arundel. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, Henry Arundel. So there's a lot of stuff I think maybe that's just been spoken about. So maybe he's just taking a bit of time before announcing the decision. It'll be interesting to see how England rugby navigate this from a captain's perspective, who they decide will be the captain, because, you know, they can't go to Courtney Laws, who, for me at least, be the next obvious option. And when he decides to come back, if he decides to come back, how they navigate that, or if he wants the captainship. All same happened with Hooper, and we unfortunately didn't see him come back.
Obviously, I think he should have. I think, yeah.
And of course he should have. And there was also a change of coaches, so there's different discussions there. So
yeah,
it's a new landscape that we haven't really seen in rugby that's unfolding, and something definitely worth kind of considering and just, you know, tipping your hat to.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to use the word cool, because it's not a cool thing, but I think it's very significant that such high-profile players have made the decision. Michael Hooper, captain of Australia; Owen Farrell, captain of England. You know, it's not like it's the young players who have come through and they're struggling because they can't really make and stuff like that. It's players who have been there, done that. I mean, Owen Farrell is one of England's record point scorers. I think he's the joint record point scorer for British and Irish Lions, for example, in tests and stuff like that. You know, he's played 150 international games or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And yet they still have, you know, putting their hands up saying, even at our level, even when we've been there, done that, and I've been doing this for 12 years, you know, I still need a break. And I'm really hoping that this will improve players' longevity. You know, I'm really hoping that for his sake, he's going to take some time off, maybe not play England next year, or maybe play at the end of the year and say, no, I'm taking Six Nations, but by the end of the year, I need to put myself onto an England shirt, and I'll play my way into that British and Irish Lions squad in 2025, for example. Because he'll be 33, I think, when he goes over, if he were to go over for that British and Irish Lions, or 34. So he's still very much on the age perspective. But yeah, it'll still be an interesting thing for us to chat about, because I think it's a very significant, and I think we mustn't downplay just how significant it is that these players are doing it. And the fact that we're seeing it in cricket, rugby, and sport all over the world, I think it's going to be hopefully important in terms of educational point of view of people realizing how much of an impact they can have on players, but more importantly on players understanding that they can do this, and as expected at a certain degree, but you know, he's had massive amount of support from, and he's even very cool. I put the video out today. A lot of the comments were people who were just saying, they said they don't really like him as a player, but, you know, full respect for doing this as a person, which is, I think, as good as we're going to get out of the South African fans, because we know that he's not popular down here.
Yeah, and I think they understand that. Like, Owen Farrell doesn't expect the rest of the world to love him. Like, he knows he's antagonizing, and he knows that on the field, at least, that, like, he knows how to ruffle feathers. And it's the tip of the cap, you know, for another fan base to hate you enough, means you a thorn in their side. If he was shite, no one would care about
nobody hates the player that's playing terribly. Everybody's just like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh, you can't wait to see his name on the team sheet. You know what I mean? And that's not the case. So, like, it's a fine line between you know, he's the person that everyone loves to hate because he has the quality to back it up. But how do we, you know, understand where that line is, and how can we judge him as a player, but not necessarily always as a person? And yeah, I think, as you said, very admirable, just to kind of put it all out on the line for himself and his family, and fair play to him.
Yeah. No, I think it's a very nice way to end here. Chaps, we talked about a lot of things on tonight. It's been very fun. So, as always, thank you very much for availing your time. I believe, if the schedule is correct, we will be seeing both of you guys over the weekend. In terms of how your watch-along schedule is looking, Mr. Rude will be kicking us off on Saturday morning, bright and early, with the return of I mean, apparently it's still pronounced Sevens despite the lack of ease in it. Svins is how they've shortened it. Svins. The Svins is back. It is in Dubai, which apparently is a good time. James has actually been there and done that. So it's actually never seen watch Sevens. It's so poor. And I'm not even going to get down to Cape Town again this year. So we're going to have to do a fair sports trip next year and all. Yeah, we know. Okay, cool, Dan. Well done. And Rouge, did you manage to get to it when it was still at George, for example?
Honestly, no, but I did follow a lot of it on TV, to be honest.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah, apparently brand new format. I don't know what it's going to mean. I mean, the game's still 7 minutes long. The game still has 7 players, but a new format's supposed to make it more exciting. So Rouge will be kicking us off with that on Saturday morning. I'll be following on with that before throwing it back to Rouge for some 7s. We'll then have some 15s. I'll be on the Bulls versus Sharks, Lions versus Dragons. And then we will also be having, I think, Rouge again with some Saturday evening 7s before Dan takes us through Stormers versus Zebra. So basically, if you are a rugby nut, we will start at 8 in the morning and we will finish when Dan says goodbye at SA time about 9:15. So 13 hours on the trot of live rugby here on Forever Sports. So yeah, buckle in, buy your data, charge your inverters. And then on Sunday, you're going to see some Rouge back on a lot of 7s as well. So Rouge is the Svins man for the weekend. And you'll see me and Dan on some URC. And Roscoe Speckman, my boy, is back for the 7 side.
Wow, what a guy.
Yeah, very, very keen to see how he's going to do back on the circuit. But gentlemen, thank you very much. We'll see you guys over the weekend. If you guys are watching and you're new to the channel, smash a like on it. On the video, subscribe to the channel so that you can see all the chaps here. Although in my case, the stash is going tomorrow. Dan, is yours going tomorrow, or have you grown fond of it and keeping it?
It always starts off ironic, and then you always start liking it. So who knows?
Because the problem is for the first 2 weeks, it's so rubbish, and you're like, oh, this looks terrible. And then eventually it starts like a reasonable moustache. But I'm getting far too many comments on my side for it, so mine will be disappearing overnight.
Okay. No, last big push. Let's put the GoFundMe in the comments.
So if you would like to support the Forever Sports November team, this is the link to do it. And
months worth of
especially on the back of talking about Owen Farrell and the whole thing. November is a big advocate of men's mental health and stuff like that. So do it for Owen. And gentlemen, I'll say goodbye to you for the 4th time. Thank you very much. Enjoy the evening, enjoy the weekend, and we will see everybody very, very soon.